Hello, my name is Eric, and I'm here to remind you today of crane and lifting safety. Cranes are amazing devices. They help us with heavy lifting operations that cannot be done safely with manual labor. They are very useful for those moves from one location to another and can lift much heavier things than any one single person can do. But with that, remember proper PPE. Make yourself visible, and also, of course, stay out of line of fire.
Look behind you!
If you feel pressured that you cannot get yourself to say no, make sure your supervisor realizes the seriousness. Bring a witness with you. Write it down. Have them initial, "I feel unsafe on this task." So if you feel pressured, at least your supervisor or someone else in charge will see that this is a serious matter. Don't become a victim. Remember, safety is everyone's responsibility. Sometimes cranes fail, and sometimes we're at fault. So one thing we got to remember is crane safety is not simply the operator's responsibility. The operator will move the object, but when you're in view of others, make sure you as a spotter, you are at that time the number one safety. You protect the other workers, and that is what you're there for. If you let someone die because you were an unsafe worker, you now have to answer to their family, their wife, and those that know what happened will spread like wildfire of what happened, and you will be pointed at no matter where you go. It can be a life-ruining experience. Let's give you some examples. Now there's no one left to watch the kids at home. I don't know what to do. I'm gonna take them for all they have. They took everything from me. Hey, that's the one that let him die. He didn't actually warn him. He had a family and everything. He let go of everything. He destroyed his entire family. Look at him. Being unsafe, just not caring. Yeah, I know that guy's parents. I think we should talk to him. They'd probably be able to knock some sense into him. What a fool. After realizing I wasn't careful, and I let my coworker die. Can't go to the grocery store. I can't go shopping anymore. Can't do anything without people pointing at me and talking. I realize I could have actually done something. If you allow an accident to happen, you may no longer be able to go shopping when you want. You may no longer be able to enjoy those things you want to enjoy.
A worker at a precast yard was callous. First, he ignored the crane siren. Then he hopped onto a moving gantry crane to hitch a ride. This was dangerous. The worker was caught between the moving gantry crane and a building column. He was crushed to death on the spot. A careless act costed this worker his life. Do not be callous in your work. Never take risks.
The incident you are about to see actually happened and resulted in the death of a longshore worker. A foreman and 3 workers were discharging aluminum ingots from a hold of a cargo ship using lifting trays secured to a crane. The supervisor recognized the trays had not been properly certified or inspected. So she ordered the gang to remove the lifting trays and switch to a system using 4 synthetic slings rigged to the crane's spreader bar to lift the load. The crew in the hold was inexperienced in rigging aluminum ingots using slings, but they attempted it anyway. At the time of the incident, the crane operator was hoisting the spreader bar that supported 4 individually slung aluminum ingots. Each ingot weighed about 1,300 pounds. Once the load cleared the top of the hatch, the crane operator began to laterally swing the load toward the pier. As the load moved to the side, the last ingot slipped, the strap broke, and the ingot fell from its sling. The ingot fell about 27 feet into the hold, hit a worker, killing him instantly. The supervisor did not ensure that the lifting tray, the ideal method for lifting this cargo, was properly inspected and certified before the start of operations. Therefore, the lifting procedure for this operation changed unexpectedly, and the workers deviated from the original lift plan. Synthetic slings were not appropriate for lifting this load, given that sharp edges on cargo make cut slings. Since synthetic slings were chosen, the sling should have been inspected for snags, tears, and cuts before use. After the lifting procedure was changed, members of the gang were not briefed on hazards associated with the new procedure and how to perform the lift safely. Operations were not halted even though the load was not properly slung. The rigging was wrong, and workers were not familiar with the proper procedures. Workers were not directed to stay clear of the suspended load. No one in the hold was prepared by training or experience to rig the load with this method. Therefore, the hold men did not inspect the synthetic slings and report problems to their supervisor when rigging the load. The workers did not ensure they were out of the danger zone, especially when working around a suspended load.
Know what you're working with, and also those around you. Warn others when the situation is becoming unsafe. Avoid those easy to get caught in pinch points. You're down below. Something's coming at you. Where are you going to go? You might be thinking, well, nothing barely ever happens. Think of it this way. How many times have you pressed south rather than north? East rather than west? What if someone was there? How many times have you dropped an object way too hard or lifted way faster than expected? What if someone was there? How many times has it happened where something may have slipped or shifted? Again, what if someone was there? When someone is there and something does happen, think about this way. How often does it happen that we as humans panic and press that wrong button and actually make things worse? So avoid that situation of panic and focus on where you're going and what has to be done. Think, plan, and watch. Remember to use that horn on the crane. Let others know you are there and deviate properly. It could simply happen, someone could run out. Make sure you have something showing that, hey, there might be something happening there, to help those people slow down and not run into harm's way. I hope you learned something today so you can go home safe and to work safe. Be there for others and protect yourself and watch out for danger. Have a wonderful day and have yourself a safe shift and come home safely.
Have a nice trip. See you next fall. I'm sure you've heard this common joke, and we've all had a giggle in comedic films when characters slip and trip. Though funny in movies, slips and trips and falls at work are no laughing matter. In the workplace, these accidents have caused over 200,000 serious injuries and 345 deaths in 2016 alone. You don't have to become a statistic. Many, possibly even most, slips, trips, and falls can be prevented. In this course, we'll learn more about what can be done to help you stay on your feet and stay safe. Now, before we get to the how-tos, let's take a moment to define some terms. What exactly is a slip, a trip, and a fall? A slip occurs when there is too little friction between a person's foot and the walking surface. Slips are often caused by spills, water, grease, dust, wood shavings, leaves, pine needles, and other debris that can make floors slippery. Highly polished or freshly waxed floors are also slip hazards. A trip is when a person's foot or lower leg hits an object and the rest of their body keeps moving. Trips are most often caused by clutter in aisles or walkways, extension cords, hoses, open filing cabinets, boxes. All of these are trip hazards. Trips can also be caused by uneven floor surfaces, unexpected drops, and gaps or cracks in walking surfaces. Both slips and trips result in lost balance. Lost balance often leads to falls. Falls to the same level, such as slipping on wet leaves and hitting the ground, can and do cause injury. But a fall from a greater height, such as off a ladder, down a flight of stairs, or from a platform, is even more dangerous. Injuries from slips, trips, and falls range from minor to the very serious. Sprains, strains, bruises, broken bones, cuts, and head injuries are all common. The good news is slips, trips, and falls and the injuries they cause are avoidable. What can be done to prevent them? First of all, some of the responsibility rests with your employer. OSHA has a number of rules and regulations pertaining to slip, trip, and fall hazards. For example, your employer is required to regularly inspect your workplace and address any issues they find. This might include providing fall protection like guardrails, harnesses, or safety nets. It might include making sure there is an anti-slip edge to all stairs. It definitely includes providing adequate lighting in all work areas and walkways. There are many ways your employer can make your workplace less prone to slips, trips, and falls, and they're all regulated by OSHA. Your employer is also required to provide you with training on the hazards in your workplace, how to use and maintain personal protective equipment, and best practices for working and walking safely. It's not all up to your employer, however. You have responsibilities too. Let's explore the top ways you can avoid slips, trips, and falls at work. Wear the right PPE. For many people, this just means wearing non-slip shoes. Depending on your job, however, there could be other equipment for you to wear. Proper use and maintenance of PPE is a must. Carrying too many items at once, looking at your phone, leaving sunglasses on when you come inside, and being distracted are risky behaviors that we're probably all guilty of on occasion. Being aware of your surroundings and maintaining visibility ensures you don't trip over an object that you couldn't see or didn't notice. Don't run at work. Take careful steps and be especially cautious on wet, icy, and highly polished flooring surfaces. When you lengthen your stride to run, you automatically increase your risk of slipping and losing your balance. Be extra careful on stairs. Use the handrail and watch out for slippery or uneven surfaces. Maintain a neat and tidy work area. Boxes blocking the hallway, loose papers strewn across the floor, extension cords zigzagging back and forth, open filing cabinets, and other clutter increase the risks of slips and trips needlessly. Show respect for your coworkers by keeping walkways clear at all times. This doesn't apply to everyone, but if you use a ladder at work, you must know how to do so safely. Before using a ladder, make sure it's in good condition. Do not use a ladder with cracks, warping, or other defects. Make sure the ladder is stable before you begin climbing. Use both hands to climb the ladder, and always maintain a solid center of balance. It only takes a second for an accident to happen. One careless moment, one bad decision, or one ill-timed distraction could put your health at risk. Slips, trips, and falls can happen anywhere. Don't take your health for granted. Keep these best practices in mind to stay on your feet and stay on the job.
Hi, I'm James Hamilton from Stumpy Nubs Woodworking Journal, and today we're going to talk about table saw kickback and how you can avoid it. Kickback is not something you want to experience at the table saw. It can be very dangerous. Not only can it eject a workpiece back at you, but it can pull your hand into the blade. In fact, many times when there's amputations at the table saw, it's not because someone was stupid enough to shove their hand through the blade. It's because the workpiece kicked back and pulled their hand into or on top of the blade, and that's how they lost their fingers. So it's good that we take a minute, even if you're a veteran table saw user, to discuss how kickback occurs and give you some reminders on how you can avoid it. There are three ways primarily that kickback can occur. The first is during a rip cut. You get halfway through the cut and the kerf begins to close on the back of the blade. This happens often in construction lumber and other case-hardened woods. If you have an underpowered saw, best case scenario is it's going to stall it, but it could also shoot the workpiece back at you or flip it up and whack you in the face. Another way that kickback can occur is as you are cutting a workpiece, it pinches between the back of the blade and the fence. And as it does, it can throw the workpiece back towards you with such force that it could embed itself in a wall behind you. So imagine what would happen if it actually struck you. Third way that kickback occurs, and perhaps the most devastating way, is as you are making the cut, the workpiece turns toward the blade, makes contact with the back tooth, and that tooth will lift the workpiece up on top of the blade, which acts as kind of a wheel or a conveyor that shoots the workpiece back at you. Even worse, as it does that, it happens so quickly that your hand can be pulled on top of the blade with it, and that's often how amputations occur. So, how do we avoid these types of kickback? Well, the most important thing is to have a splitter or riving knife on your table saw. Usually that's included on your blade guard. That little piece of metal on the back that holds it above the table saw, that is a splitter that is supposed to protect the back of your blade. So it's very important that you keep this installed on your saw. Of course, realistically, many people take these off. Maybe it's because they feel like they get in the way, or they just have a cut that they cannot do with the blade guard installed. So if you take it off, you absolutely should install a riving knife in its place. Even for one cut, put that riving knife on. Riving knives are ideal because they raise and lower with the blade, which means they maintain a consistent small gap between the blade and the riving knife. So if something it were to try to pinch on the back of the blade or turn into the back of the blade, it will strike the riving knife and not the spinning blade. If you do not have a riving knife, and most older saws do not come equipped with them, then you'll want to make a homemade insert with a splitter. Splitters are not as good as a riving knife because they don't raise and lower with the blade. And so if you have a splitter that's installed that allows you to make a cut with the blade fully raised, and then you lower the blade to cut like 3/4 inch material, you're going to have a wider gap behind the blade between it and the splitter. And so it's a little less protection, but still it is far better to have a splitter like this than to have nothing at all. Of course, it's not all about riving knives and splitters. It's also important that you properly align your table saw. The blade and the fence should be parallel to the miter slot. If the blade is closer to the fence in the back than it is in the front, that's when your workpiece can get pinched and shot back at you. So it's very important to check every once in a while and make sure that the blade and the fence are parallel to the slot. Sometimes as we're making cuts, particularly cross cuts, a workpiece can get caught between the blade and the fence. Sometimes new woodworkers feel like they want to cut 5 inches off the end of a workpiece, and so they'll get their miter gauge set up and they'll set their fence at 5 inches, and they'll put the workpiece up against the fence, and they'll think, well, I can just make a cut in this position and it's going to be all right. It's not going to be all right, because this workpiece towards the end of the cut, the offcut is going to turn and it's going to pinch against the back of the blade and shoot back at you. So you should never allow an offcut like this to come free from the main workpiece between the fence and the blade. In fact, you not only want to move that fence just a little bit away to give yourself some clearance, but you want to move it a lot away, because if it's still close but not touching, that offcut can still twist at the end of the cut. A square is wider from corner to corner than it is from edge to edge. And so it can still make contact with the blade and the fence at the same time and kick back at you. So get that fence out of the way as you're making your cuts. If you're making repeated offcuts, just cutting a little bit off multiple work pieces, you should also not allow those offcuts to pile up next to the blade. The vibrations of the saw will cause them to move toward the blade, where a small one can get picked up by that back tooth and shoot back and potentially injure you or someone else. So get your offcuts out of the way. You also never want to work with stock that is rough sawn on the table saw. A table saw is not designed to be used with rough sawn stock. The stock needs to have a flat surface on top of the saw and a straight edge against the fence. If there's a bow or a cup or a twist, as you cut, that's going to collapse into the blade. It's going to pinch on one side or the other or both and shoot back at you. So take it to the jointer first. Make sure you have a flat surface on top of the saw and a straight edge against the fence before you make any cuts. It's very common to use a push stick when you're working at the table saw, but you also have to know how to use that properly. Some people will engage the push stick on the end of the workpiece as it's still hanging off the saw. And by doing that, you could apply pressure downward and lift the workpiece off the blade. Then it could come back down on top of the blade and kick back at you. You want to wait until the workpiece is on top of the saw so it's supported. Then you can put it on the end and push it through the rest of the cut. Push sticks like this are nice for certain situations, especially narrow stock, but I like to use a wider, longer one like this. I just made it myself from a piece of 2x6 because this has a heel that hooks on the back of the workpiece, and the body of the push block can apply downward pressure to keep your workpiece flat on the table as you push it through. Either way, we want to also make sure that the push stick or the push block is engaged in the right place on our stock. If you take a push stick and you push on the edge closest to your fence, you risk turning the workpiece into the cut. Best case scenario is you're going to get a rough cut, but worst case scenario is you could get kickback. So you want to place your push stick in the center of the workpiece, or your push block, even better. Place that in the center of the workpiece so that you push it evenly and straight through the cut. Finally, as a last resort to avoid kickback, you always want to stand to the side as you make your cut. You never want to stand directly behind the blade, Stay out of the path of the kickback in case it occurs, so it'll go past you and not through you. For more great woodworking tips, tricks, and tutorials designed to make you a better woodworker, check out the latest issue of Stumpy Nubs Woodworking Journal. You can read and subscribe for free at stumpynubs.com. Happy sawing!